Supporters of La Liga team Valencia hurled racist abuse at Brazilian footballer Vinícius Júnior during Sunday's match with Real Madrid. And despite being the victim of the racist abuse, Vinicius was actually the one who was punished. Tariq Panja from the New York Times reported on this and said, on Sunday, Vinícius Júnior was met by fans chanting the word mono, monkey, before he even stepped off the Real Madrid bus outside the Mestalla Stadium in Valencia. The match was briefly halted in the 71st minute as he pointed out some of his abusers to the referee, and an anti-racism statement, part of the league protocol for such incidents, was read to the crowd over the stadium loudspeakers. But after that, he received a red card in the dying minutes of injury time after scuffling with an opponent who had charged at him. And I wish I could show you the video of that incident. I can't because ESPN owns the rights to broadcast La Liga, which is owned by Disney, which is particularly litigious about their copyrights. But I would suggest everyone go look at the video, because even in that video, you'll see that Vinicius is not the person who's acting like the most aggressive. There's a moment in that scuffle, as Tariq Panja described it, where he's being put in a headlock by a Valencia player, and he was the person sent off. Now, Vinny has been the target of racial abuse and racism since he joined Real Madrid, but he put out a statement and spoke out against this injustice, but also about the injustice and the league's unwilling to address racism as a whole. So he made an Instagram and Twitter post that said, "A beautiful nation which welcomed me and which I love, but which agreed to export the image of a racist country to the world. I'm sorry for the Spaniards who don't agree, but today in Brazil, Spain is known as a country of racists." And he continued on, "It wasn't the first time, nor the second, nor the third. Racism is normal in La Liga. The competition thinks it's normal. The federation does too, and the opponents encourage it." But thankfully, Vinicius has the backing of Real Madrid's manager, Carlo Ancelotti, as well as a lot of his teammates and other players, including the Real Madrid keeper Thibaut Courtois, and Kylian Mbappe from PSG also put out a statement. But let's first talk about what Carlo Ancelotti, his manager, had to say. According to CNN, Los Blancos manager Ancelotti addressed the situation after the game to Movistar Plus, saying, "I don't want to talk about football today. When a whole stadium is chanting monkey at a player and the manager has to think about taking off a player because of it, there is something bad happening in this league." He continued on, in a separate interview with reporters, Ancelotti suggested referees should call off matches in other instances of racism in the league. The Italian said, "I'm very sad because La Liga is a league with big teams, with a good atmosphere. This we have to get rid of. We are in 2023. Racism does not have to exist. The only way for me is to stop the game." And then lastly, I want to read the comments from the Real Madrid keeper Thibaut Courtois, who was supporting Vinny Jr. and said, "There are things that should never happen inside or outside a stadium. No to racism or intolerance. I support Vinicius very much. If he chose to walk off, I would follow him." And I've got some more, but first, Fran, I want to bring you in on this and just say, I think that at this point, it's not just La Liga. I mean, Serie A, we've seen so many instances. We've seen it, right, with the Chelsea supporters chanting, "We're racist and we like it," and the league's just really not caring about these instances of racism. I think we're at a point where the players just have to say, "We're not going to play. We're not going to play until you actually do something about this."
Yeah, it happens throughout all European soccer leagues and Latin American soccer leagues in that. In their particular ways, but again, still very, very laden with racism. Anti-Black racism is kind of ubiquitous among soccer fans, and it's sort of like fine and okay to chant. And the rule has been newly that if there are these racist chants, there is a warning to the crowd, and if those don't stop, then the game has to stop. And the real thing is the refs and the moneymakers have to pull the plug, and they have to actually implement those kinds of threats. They have to make good on them. But of course they won't, again, because they're trying to make money. They don't want to suspend the game. And so, the crowd is going to continue to do that. But unless they actually are reprimanded and face consequences, this is going to continue. And it is very hard to watch one player feel the weight of tens of thousands of fans jeering at them. And they've had to endure this for so long. And the last thing I'm gonna say is I'm a huge fan of the World Cup, right? Which is sort of, again, this like in the year 2023, a hilarious kind of like throwback to nationalism in a lot of countries that are incredibly multiracial and multi-ethnic, right? And so you see a France team that is, majority Afro-French, a lot of folks who weren't necessarily born in France, but were, or whose parents weren't born in France, right? And these are the same supporters and fans who come out and support, the Spanish team or the French team or the Italian team, even though like a season ago or like a few months ago, they were chanting racist things just because that person was on the opposing team. No, you can't have it both ways, and someone has to stop it.
Yeah, exactly. But it seems like the person who's going to stop it is not going to be LaLiga President Javier Tebas, who just in the most embarrassing and like tone deaf way decided to fight this with Vinicius on Twitter. And he tweeted this: "We have tried," and he's adding Vinicius in this tweet. He's speaking directly to him. We have tried to explain to you what La Liga is and what it can do in cases of racism, but you have not shown up to either of the two agreed dates that you yourself requested. Before criticizing and insulting La Liga, you need to inform yourself properly, Vinicius. Don't let yourself be manipulated, and make sure you understand the work we have been doing together," which is so heinous. But thankfully, Vinicius quickly fired back at him and sort of dismissed this like pathetic attempt to exonerate himself and La Liga as a whole. And Vinicius said, "Once again, instead of criticizing racists, the president of La Liga appears on social media to attack me. As much as you talk and pretend not to read, the image of your championship has been hit by this. See the responses to your posts and you will have a surprise. Omitting yourself only makes you equal to racists. I am not your friend to talk about racism with. I want actions and punishments. Hashtags don't move me," which is very fantastic statement. And just lastly, I want to say, because Vinicius doesn't have on his side the president of La Liga, but he does have the president of Brazil, who is Lula, who made a statement about this actually, according to the New York Times. Speaking at a news conference at the close of a G7 summit in Japan, Brazil's President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva said he wanted to send a message of solidarity to Vinicius, saying it was unjust that he gets insulted at every stadium where he plays. It's not possible in the middle of the 21st century to have such strong racial prejudice in so many football stadiums, Lula said, which I think is really powerful, just to have, to know that the president of your country is on your side while you're in this fight against racism, even though you're in Europe, you're in a different country, that you're still getting the backing of your president.
Yeah, absolutely. Bolsonaro would be like, "What's the problem? He is a monkey." Like, okay, right? The last thing I want to say is I think everyone needs to understand the kind of dripping liberal patronizing tone that like, or the patronizing tone of supposed liberalism that the president of La Liga demonstrated. Meaning, he's saying, "Oh, well, we set dates to sort of discuss racism in an open forum," or whatever BS PR move that La Liga wanted to do. And Vinicius is like, "No, man, I'm not gonna like participate again in this like coffee with cops moment. You need to actually stop the game and implement consequences when these chants happen. Enough."
Exactly, and I mean, he's also mentioned the hashtag, which is a lot of these leagues have been doing the "show racism the red card" hashtag. But it's like,
oh my God!
But it's every time there's an instance of racism, you're not showing it the red card. You're giving it a free kick. Like,
yes,
you're just allowing this to happen.
He was ejected from the game. Right. He is in a chokehold. Anyway.
He's gonna serve a 3 or 4 match suspension after being the victim of horrific racism. It's just so absolutely absurd.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.